The Caribbean Sea this week is like a powder keg ready to explode at any moment. Using the excuse of cracking down on drug trafficking gangs, Washington suddenly sent a fleet of warships, nuclear submarines and modern reconnaissance aircraft to approach Venezuela, a move that everyone understands is not simply about fighting crime. Venezuela immediately protested fiercely, but before the incident could calm down, another shock occurred. Two eternal rivals of the beauty took the opportunity to step in and turn this already hot sea into a global hotspot. So who are those two countries? What do they want when they rush into the Venezuela chessboard? And will that move turn Venezuela into the fuel for a global confrontation? From oil reserves to superpower battlefield, the tension between the US and Venezuela in recent days, which was already at a feverish level, suddenly turned to a new turn. What Washington did not expect was that this confrontation had gone beyond the bilateral scope, because when the US increased its naval power to approach the Caribbean Sea, two veteran opponents on the international chessboard, China and North Korea, immediately stepped in, turning Venezuela into a new global arena. On August the 21st, Beijing officially responded, with Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Mao Ning clearly stating that we oppose all actions using or threatening force, and oppose external interference in Venezuela's internal affairs. This is not only a diplomatic warning, but also a move to establish a stance that Latin America cannot be left as the backyard of the United States by default. China chose the right time, when the United States deployed warships to openly stand with Caracas, thereby affirming its position as a powerful protector of developing countries. But the next signal is even stronger. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro Moros did not hesitate to show off the phone, a gift from President Xi Jinping, as a way to prove that Beijing is right next to Venezuela, ready to support both technology and diplomacy. Just a few days later, he received Chinese Ambassador Lan Hu, and both sides announced to accelerate economic and technological cooperation in 2025. More surprisingly, North Korea also joined in. From Pyongyang, leader Kim Jong-un sent a message of support for Venezuela in the fight for peace. For North Korea, this is not just a symbolic support war. Pyongyang has long considered anti-US as a global cause, and Venezuela is a new link in the chain of encircling Washington with hotspots from Asia to Latin America. The intervention of both Beijing and Pyongyang has immediately hindered Washington's calculations. What should have been just an anti-drug campaign now risks turning into a multipolar confrontation, and over time the level will certainly increase. China can increase economic and military aid to Venezuela and even deploy technological, surveillance and air defense infrastructure. North Korea, despite its economic limitations, can completely provide military, missile technology or even send experts to support Caracas. If this scenario continues, the US will not only face Venezuela alone, but also have to consider the continued presence of the two most stubborn opponents on the planet. At that time, the Caribbean Sea may no longer be Washington's own stage, but will become a new front in the US-China confrontation. With support from North Korea, the risk of igniting a new global crisis cannot be underestimated. So just because of an anti-drug campaign, it is enough to attract both North Korea and China to jump in and turn Venezuela into an arena to directly confront the US. What is the real reason? Tensions were boiling. On August the 23rd at Bolivar Square, in the capital Caracas, hundreds of Venezuelans lined up to register to join the national militia. This was a direct response to President Nicolas Maduro's call for all citizens to stand up to protect the country's sovereignty in times of danger. Not only young people but also civil servants and state employees were present with them. Wearing the militia uniform was not only a duty, but also an oath to protect the country against increasing pressure from Washington. That pressure was most clearly demonstrated through a series of rapid actions from the US. Recently, the U.S. Department of Justice doubled the reward to $50 million for anyone who provides information leading to the arrest of Mr. Maduro. Caracas immediately reacted strongly, considering this a plot to poison public opinion and seek to overthrow the leadership of Venezuela. However, on August the 24th, Washington officially mobilized a powerful naval and air force to approach the Caribbean Sea. The USS San Antonio, USS Iwo Jima and USS Fort Lauderdale landing squadrons with about 4,500 troops accompanied by Pieta Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft, a series of destroyers and guided missile cruisers, Nominally, this is a campaign aimed at drug trafficking gangs in Latin America, but looking at the scale, it is hard to believe that all of them are just to arrest a few smugglers. This is not the first time that the US has used the pretext of fighting drug trafficking gangs to expand its military presence, especially under Donald Trump, who has repeatedly emphasized that suppressing criminal gangs is a key goal associated with immigration policy and protecting the southern border. In recent months, Washington has deployed at least 2 warships for intelligence and surveillance at sea. Not to mention that since February this year, the U.S. has officially put the Sinaloa cartel of Mexico, along with many large criminal groups in Latin America, including the Tren de Aragua Organization of Venezuela, on the list of global extremist organizations. Once Washington labels someone as an extremist, it naturally has the basis to apply military measures. If it is only to crack down on criminals, why doesn't the U.S. join hands and coordinate with countries in the region that are also having headaches with the problem of smuggling, but instead arbitrarily mobilizes a powerful naval force to approach Venezuelan territory? In particular, the excuse of fighting drug trafficking gangs in Venezuela becomes even more ridiculous because in reality, the most serious drug trafficking problem is in Mexico and Colombia. It is clear that behind the excuse of anti-drugs is a deeper geopolitical calculation. Venezuela is possessing a black treasure that the whole world is extremely coveted. The oil reserves are determined to be up to 48 billion tons, the largest on the planet, and that makes this South American country a thorn in the eye of Washington. The familiar thinking of the US has always been very clear: if you have oil, we will fly and swim for democracy. With Venezuela, that saying is more accurate than ever because this is a country that is not under the control of the US, but owns a huge amount of oil. In addition, President Nicolas Maduro also revoked the licenses of American oil and gas corporations and redirected more than 90% of oil exports to China and India. For Washington, this was an unacceptable insult. Donald Trump's patience was exhausted at that time. In short, the so-called anti-drug campaign was just a drama. In reality, Washington wanted to create a blockade at sea, gradually suffocating Venezuela's economy while blocking the huge flow of oil to China, India, and soon, possibly Russia. In addition, President Nicolas Maduro also revoked the licenses of American oil and gas corporations and redirected more than 90% of oil exports to China and India. For Washington, this was an unacceptable insult. Donald Trump's patience was exhausted at that time. In short, the so-called anti-drug campaign was just a drama. In reality, Washington wanted to create a blockade at sea, gradually suffocating Venezuela's economy while blocking the huge flow of oil to China, India, and soon, possibly Russia. But Caracas is not empty-handed. On the contrary, Venezuela has long prepared for the scenario of being militarily attacked by the US. Regarding air defense, this country owns a rare steel shield in Latin America, which is the S-300VM Anti-2500, Buck M2E, Tor M1, Pecora 2M system along with thousands of IGLAS shoulder-fired missiles. Experts assess that this air defense force is not only the strongest in the region, but is even superior to Brazil and Mexico combined. This is the result of many years of close military cooperation with Russia and Belarus, especially after the 2019 emergency aid package, when more than 90 Russian experts went directly to Venezuela to install radars, command post and train operations. The Venezuelan Air Force is also a formidable opponent, with 23 Russian-made Su-30 MKVs and 12 Block 15 F-16s. Their navy, although smaller, is still capable of causing trouble, with 2 Type 209 diesel-electric submarines, 6 Lupo-class frigates, and many missile and landing ships. The Venezuelan army maintains 170,000 active troops, including 15,000 elite special forces trained directly by Russia and China, who have extensive experience in jungle warfare and special sabotage operations. The reserve force has up to 2 million troops ready to supplement when needed. Don't forget that the dense jungle terrain of Venezuela is very different from the Middle Eastern desert, where US satellites can easily detect targets. In Caracas, everything is hidden under the trees, making any invasion a nightmare. With such a complex defense system, what can thousands of US Marines do? The answer is most likely the same as In May 2020, when a group of US-backed commandos tried to infiltrate Venezuela to incite a coup, and ended up being captured by the Venezuelan army after just a few hours in La Guera near Caracas. Of course, no one can deny that the US is the world's #1 military power with superior naval, army and air force strength, and if compared directly, Venezuela will find it difficult to resist in the long term. But the key point lies in the will. Caracas has proven that they are ready to turn any conflict into a total people's war. On the other hand, this move of Washington is even more difficult to succeed because, when Washington sends troops, not only will Caracas react, but it will also attract the attention of forces that have long confronted the US, such as North Korea and China. According to many international experts, Venezuela is facing two dangerous scenarios. The first scenario, and also the most haunting scenario, is that this oil country will turn into a second Syria, where the great powers confront each other directly, through the form of proxy war. As in the previous form, the US and its allies will seek to overthrow the unfriendly government, while on the other side, Russia and Iran will try to protect it. For Venezuela, the alternative to Russia and Iran could be China and North Korea, countries that are taking advantage of the US's increased military presence to openly support Caracas. If this happens, Venezuela will risk falling into a prolonged spiral of chaos, where its own people will have to bear the most severe price. The second scenario, according to experts, is that Venezuela will not break out into a full-scale war, but will become a regional hotspot like Cuba in 1962, which almost pushed the world to the brink of nuclear war just because of the military presence of the US and the Soviet Union. In this scenario, Venezuela will witness secret confrontations, US and Chinese warships approaching each other at sea, UAVs and reconnaissance drones constantly provoking, and just a small incident such as a warning shot or a collision of ships can also trigger a global crisis. What is certain, according to analysts, is that the more pressure Washington increases, the closer Caracas will get to Beijing and Pyongyang, and the line between an anti-drug campaign and an international confrontation is increasingly blurred, leaving a destabilizing prospect that the world cannot ignore.